Have fun.
Thanks, man. Thank you. Being scheduled next to Sam and Mike, I figured this room would be mostly empty, so thanks for coming. I wanted to point out probably the most important thing in this room. This sponsor right here. I don't speak Danish, but I know what this says. These are my initials right here. Aaron Frost. So I'm going to tell you what this says to me, and I appreciate it. Believe in Aaron Frost. Expertness experter. So what does that what does it really say? Because that's what it says to me. So, all right. That's better, right? Okay. I should get hired for their marketing team. Okay. So we're going to talk about lazy loading, and I'm here because I love Angular. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, I'm just Aaron Frost on Twitter. So, lazy loading. We just had lunch. We just took a picture. Everyone's identifying with the polar bear a little bit, right? Our code needs to identify with them a little bit too. So the more of an architect you become in your Angular team, the more you're going to start to need to focus and really start to peel back the layers around lazy loading. And does anyone here look at their page speed score? Yeah. Anyone look at their lighthouse scores? So the more you look at these, you start to appreciate some of the fine arts around lazy loading. And a lot of us are kind of like confused because there's only one way to lazy load in Angular, right? Like just with the route. So we're going to go over some of the finer points around lazy loading, some of the misconceptions, and some of the advanced contextual loading that we need to do as well. So there's actually quite a bit going on in lazy loading. I know we just have to write one magic string and then we're done, but there's a lot going on, and Angular makes it largely easy. So we're going to talk about those two pieces, and then we're going to get a little bit more into some advanced stuff. We'll go a little bit deeper, talk about what's going on, and show off a couple contextual loading. So some of us are like, Angular already solved this. Why are we talking about lazy loading? So what if you need to load something that's not Angular? Like D3 is an example. Some of our websites will have a PayPal button, and that one PayPal button will cost us like 100 kilobytes, right, at runtime. Like sometimes we need to contextually load some things, and sometimes we need to load those things on moments other than route changing, right? It's not just around a route change that we need to load some of those things. I want you to think about, what if you didn't load the admin section unless the user was an admin? That's a contextual lazy loading as well. And then some people, they even have taken some of the things that we're going to talk about today. They'll check their user's connection speed, and there's no real accurate way to do that in the browser. So they'll take a rough guesstimate of their connection speed to decide what pieces of the app they will load or won't load, and to kind of change some of their loading strategies. So there's a lot of things going on that that merit us talking about it. So I'm going to kind of take us through some of the moving parts around being lazy. So at a high level, if we have an app that this is a simple app, right? It has 3 routes. It has our home route, has our donut route, and then it has a donut detail route. And if we wanted to lazily load our app, it would change slightly. This app would load all the code when the app loads up front. So if you wrote this kind of an app module, all your code for your whole app would be loading the second the user hit the page. But we can make a couple changes, and we can lazy load our different routes and our different bundles. And in this scenario, if the user goes to the home path, it will load the home module. If they go to the donuts route, it will load the donut module. And if they go to the donut detail route, it will load the donut detail module. So that's kind of what it looks like. And it will, in our app, will automatically split those out into 3 different bundles that contain everything that they need to run those different modules. But there's actually quite a bit going on here. There's a lot more heavy lifting happening than what we're seeing, and I kind of want to peel that back because a lot of us have been. Who here's like really been coding only with the Angular CLI? This is like their first foray into development. Who here's done who here remembers back into like the grunt and gulp days and the Webpack days when we had to roll our own stuff? So there's a significant amount. So a lot of us will remember some of the pain that we had to go through to get advanced and contextual lazy loading into our apps before our current environment with the Angular CLI. And so there's actually a lot going on here. So I kind of want to peel back what's happening. So we start with the CLI, and the CLI under the covers is using Webpack, and we all know that very soon, maybe using Bazel, and even some of us have turned it on in our test and production apps. And we build our app, and we have those same 3 modules that we just showed in the previous screen. And what happens is those modules get fed into the CLI. The CLI feeds them into either Webpack or Bazel, and outputs a JavaScript file, and then the browser loads that. And if we want to, when we lazy load, by using those magical strings, we're effectively telling the CLI, hey, I want you to break that piece out into one bundle. I want you to break the second piece out into its own bundle, and the third one out into its own bundle. So we get all that out of just this magic string. And there's actually 2 main pieces happening with this string. And the 2 main pieces are actually split right on that hashtag, okay, in that magic string. And the first part is the path to the bundle, the module, the ng module that we're trying to lazy load. So what this half of the string does is it tells Webpack to go create a separate bundle, and then it also asks it to load that when that route is hit. So that's kind of what the first part of that magical string is doing. But what does the second half do? The second half also has a function. And so it talks to an interface called the ng module factory loader. Has anyone had to implement their own ng module factory loader? A couple hands went up. Okay. This is a little bit more of an advanced piece of lazy loading. And in Angular, their implementation of the ng module factory loader is called the System.js ng module factory loader. Okay. And what this does is it forces the download of the bundle, and then it loads whatever string you put after that hashtag. It looks for that module by name. So it's going to load the hode module into Angular so that it can be reused by the routing module. And then the routes, once that's loaded and that's successful, then the router can go ahead and react to whatever, it can finish reacting to whatever route just was reached. So that's kind of the path that we're going through when we hit, that's kind of the 2 halves. So the first half is everything on the left of the string, the second half is everything on the right of the string. And so in a second, we're going to get into talking about manual lazy loading. And manual lazy loading or contextual loading has to do all those same things. It has to say, hey, download the bundle when X happens, force Angular to recognize the bundle, and then one way or the other, we have to say, hey, I need you to turn on one of the components in that bundle and put it somewhere. So, but it still is depending on these same 2 strings, the same 2 parts of the string. Create a separate bundle, load it when I say, register the bundle with Angular, and then this is, again, how lazy loading happens today. But there's some giant misconceptions around what's going on in Angular when things get lazy loaded. And I kind of, going around and looking at a bunch of different companies working on a handful of teams, there's one really large misconception that I see around lazy loading in Angular, and hopefully we have some aha moments going on when we go through this step. So this big misconception is we have our giant app, right? We have a big Angular app, and it's got a bunch of pieces in it. And we've decided, no, we don't want that. Like we we want to break it up into smaller pieces so that when the app gets loaded, it can load faster. The users can download less stuff in order to begin to look at what's going on inside of our app. So what's actually happening, so what we'll do is we'll break our app up into a main module, and then we'll have a bunch of feature modules. And in our mind, everything for the feature module is everything the feature module uses doesn't get loaded until it's needed, right? So I kind of wanted to go through some of the misconceptions there, because that's not entirely what does happen. In our build, and this is kind of not unique to Webpack, it will also happen in a Bazel flavor as well. But our app gets broken into a main bundle and into a common bundle. And the common bundle is where anything that's used by more than one person is going to be put. Okay, so if we have two lazy loaded packages that require the same thing, it's going to go into the common bundle. So I'm going to kind of walk us through that. So if our food component uses this subcomponent right there, and this route's the only one that uses the food component, then we're good. It will only get included into that bundle. But largely what's happening is our food component may be used in a handful of places. So what the build's going to do is it's going to take it out of there, and it's going to stick it up into the common module. And it's going to, without us knowing, it's going to start stripping out all the reused pieces from our feature modules and putting them into a commons bundle. So if we have a service that we use, we put it in shared because we want it to be lazily loaded, but two places depend on the same service, that's actually getting delivered when your app's delivered. Okay, so there's a lot of misconceptions going on there. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because some people go to extraordinary lengths to keep their components separate. They'll go to the length of, they'll create a new module for every single component. So imagine that. Some of us have 500 or 600 components in our app. Imagine if you had one module for every single component. Like, that's outrageous. And they're doing it out of a good spot. They want to be able to lazily load those on demand. They want to be able to pull those in when they're needed and not until they're needed. But the second that two sections of our app depend on the same module, that gets put up in that commons chunk, and the commons chunk gets loaded the second our app turns on. And that's the reality of lazy loading in Angular. And really, this is the reality of lazy loading on the modern web. This isn't a limitation of Angular or the CLI. This is currently how Webpack works. And your other option, if you don't want to deal with this, is you can turn commons chunking off. And it's, in some scenarios, it's an okay idea to do. Largely, it's a bad idea. Because, and the only reason I'm pointing this out is because when people hear this, their immediate knee-jerk is, oh, well, let's turn off commons chunking. So let me explain what happens if you turn off commons chunking. So you go through the exact same scenario I just described, and I want you to imagine you have some service that does something magical, right? And two people depend on it. If you turn off commons chunking, that magical service gets put into both lazy loaded bundles, okay? And so does every other component that's used in multiple places. So if you turn off commons chunking, sometimes you're going to be decreasing the initial app load size of your app, but overall you're going to be duplicating a whole lot of code in your download sizes. So it's not a great idea to do. Okay, so many of your lazy loaded components that you think you're lazy loading, you're not, and that's not your fault. And to put it another way, even though you're trying to lazy load it, it's still getting turned on. It's still getting put in when your app starts, which is a little bit of a frustrating reality, right? So I want to show off some other tools that you can use to really kind of exploit and kind of stretch your legs around lazy loading and getting your app fine-tuned. So we're going to kind of step off the happy path in Angular of using the router to lazy load, and we're going to talk about some other options. So how can you lazy load without a route change in Angular? Has anyone ever done this? Raise your hand if you've done it. Okay, a couple hands went up. Who wants to do it? Who thinks it sounds like a good idea? Yeah, a lot of us are like, yeah, we need to do this. Okay, so I want you to think about a couple things. I want you to think about a modal that's not tied to a route, and that modal uses Google Maps. okay? If that modal is rarely opened, we don't really want to load Google Maps every single time that feature's like approached, or every time that the previous route or the parent route is loaded. We only want to contextually load the Google Maps stuff, or contextually load like that PayPal integration that we talked about, or our D3 library that we use to write charts, 3JS, and everyone here knows all the different libraries they're using. So there's a huge amount of need to lazy load non-Angular code, but there's also and to do it outside of a route change, but there's also a ton of need to lazy load Angular code as well. So we're going to kind of go through those things. Like we talked about admin users, we talked about large third-party libs, a modal being opened. So I kind of want to walk through how hard it is, like how to do both of these things. So if we're loading non-Angular code, it's actually pretty trivial, even though none of us, it might not look trivial at first, like if at your first like glance, it might seem pretty complicated. But if you're loading Angular code, it's actually pretty complicated. And I've done some things to make it easier, and I'm going to show those off today. But it is a pretty complicated process. We just walk through all those steps that have to happen, right? In order for lazy loading to work, you have to do all those. You have to make sure that all that gets taken care of. All that magic string does for you, you have to kind of manually do when you decide, hey, I'm going to manually or contextually lazy load Angular code. So let's walk through how we would lazy load non-Angular code. And I think it's going to be a lot easier than a lot of people are imagining. So let's pretend in our app we've installed D3. Has anyone here used D3? Okay, cool. That's actually a lot more than I thought. So a lot of us have. If you haven't, it's a library that makes working with data and visualizing the data a lot easier. So once you've done that, you need to go in and you have to change your TS config. And this is based on today. Maybe with Angular 8 coming out, tomorrow or Wednesday, this changes. But you do have to modify your TS config to allow you to use a dynamic import syntax that you can see down below. So once you've modified your TS config, when you want to lazy load something like D3, in your code you write kind of what I've shown here. All you have to do is say import, but you use import as a function, okay? And this is called dynamic importing. And Webpack or Bazel will look at that statement and it will say, all right, I need to make a separate bundle for that import statement. And whenever anyone calls import and passes the string D3, I'll lazy load that bundle that I prepared during the build step. And it returns a promise, so like you have a way of saying don't do anything until after it's done loading, downloading it from the server. So this is actually all it takes to lazy load code in Angular, like non-Angular code. So I mean, if we sit back and we think about our app and all the third-party stuff we're using, there should be a lot of things that we can begin to lazily load using this technique. So I'm going to kind of walk us through a demo real quick of how we can do that. Okay, so we have a standard app component here, and I've installed D3 ahead of time just so we can kind of see it. You'll notice when our app loads, I'm going to go ahead and do a refresh. Sorry. Okay, so when our app loads, we get kind of all the same usual suspects we normally get. We don't have any extra bundles being downloaded. So I'm going to go ahead and make the changes we talked about to get D3 to load. So I already modified my TS config. So if you come to the TS config, and you'll notice that my module is set to ES next. And then let's just kind of force this to happen in the app component. Okay, so in the app component.html, let's just make a button that when we click it will load D3. Okay, and this button click could be any event. It could be a mouse over. It could be a timed delay. We could check for their internet speed before we do it. Like they could be an admin user. There's a lot of things that are around it. I'm just going to tie it to a button click just for the sake of this demo. So we'll do a button. Click to load D3, and then we'll say click equals load D3. I can type. Okay? And then we'll go to our app component. What happened? What did I do? Oh, yeah, good call. Thank you. I was like Ben Kenobi right there. I was like, dude, everyone cried out at the same time. Okay. All right. So load D3. And we're just going to say, when this gets called, we'll say import D3. And then we'll do a dot then off that. And we'll have the module. Console.log loaded D3, and we'll log the module as well. Okay? All right. So let's go ahead, go back over to our code, and we will run this. So you can see it's not loading it, and I'll go ahead and clear this out just so we can watch it load. And when I click this, it goes ahead and it created a separate bundle. And if you look in here, you can kind of see all the D3 usual suspect stuff going on. So the other thing that happened when I did this was, if we pull up my terminal, when I did that import, it created a separate bundle. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and kill this and restart it so everyone can kind of see that that separate bundle gets created. So I'm going to take a second and rebuild that. I'm tempting the demo gods to not blow up as I restart my build during the presentation. Okay, so you can see the top thing that got spit out is this bundle that it's going to use anytime someone says import and passes the string D3. That bundle 0.js will get loaded. So that's kind of all it takes to lazily load code in Angular. Non-Angular code, sorry. Not Angular code. Loading Angular code is a little bit more difficult. But let's go ahead and do it. Let's load some Angular code. So the first thing you have to do is, if you think back to our magic string that we created, that we use when we're lazy loading on routes, we still need to tell Angular, hey, look at that bundle and lazy load this thing. Create a separate bundle for that module. So if we open up our Angular JSON, and this is new in Angular 7, if you go down into your project, architect, build options, there's a new property called lazy modules, which is an array that you can pass an array of strings to. And anything that you put in here will, the Webpack or the Bazel build will create a separate bundle for that, all right? So this, you do have to do this, and once you do this, you're gonna have to restart your build, okay? After you've done that, I made, there's like 20 things you have to do next. So I made an open source project that people are beginning to use. It's called the Hero Loader. I used to call it Lazy AF because I'm lazy, but some people they didn't like my initials in the title, so I changed it to Hero Loader. I work for a company called Hero Devs, and so we open source it under the Hero Devs package. So the Hero Loader, it kind of does a lot of the rest for you. So what you'll need to do next is you need some way of triggering to tell Hero Loader to do its thing. So in this code example I have up above, if you mouse over that div, then that Hero Loader is going to get ngIf'd back into the DOM. And once that component's turned on, it's going to go ahead and do exactly what we want it to do. And you can kind of see that module name that we're passing to the Hero Loader. Looks pretty familiar, yeah? It looks like that same thing we did in the router. And that's because I wanted to make it easily identifiable and learnable for everyone who needs to do this stuff. So it kind of follows that same API. So you can pass it that same magic string with the hashtag and the module name in it, and it kind of takes care of it for you. Now, there's one main difference between this and lazy loading. When you're lazy loading, or sorry, between this and the route lazy loading, when you're lazy loading with the route, once it's lazy loaded, the app will look at the route configuration inside of that lazy module and say, oh, I need to load that component. But here, it's not tied to a route, so we actually have to tell it in this lazy loaded module. You have to tell it how you want it to which component in that lazy loaded module you want it to turn on and where you want to put it. And so I'm going to kind of go through an example with everyone so we can kind of see how that works, okay? So let's go back to our code. I was going to just do some slides for this, but I figured it might be a little bit easier if we kind of saw it hands-on. So in our app, we have our lazy loaded foo component, or foo module. Okay, if we come to our app here, let me just go to app modules so you can see it. So we have really only one route in our app. If you go to foo, it will lazy load the foo module. All right. Now I want to lazy load also the bar module, and I want it to turn on the bar component in the bar module. So we're gonna go through the steps we need to do this. So let's open up the angular.json. Am I out of time? I have a few more minutes? Okay, perfect. He didn't even pay attention. I could go over if I wanted to. All right. So we're going to come over here, go to lazy modules, and we're going to pass in here source, app, bar.module. Okay, now that I've done that, I have to restart my build. And now that we've got that in there, and I've already installed the hero devs hero loader. So let's go to my app component, and we're just going to modify the app component. The first thing I have to do, because I need that hero loader component, is I have to import the hero loader module. Okay. Now that I've done that, over in our app component, we're just going to add another. Oh yeah, good call. Thank you. Okay, perfect. All right, so over here, we're just going to add kind of another way to load the bar module. And we're going to put it inside of a span, okay? And the reason that we're going to put it inside of a span is because when you use the hero loader, it kind of appends the component that it's going to turn on. It kind of appends it to itself. So the last thing we have to do is we have to come to this bar module, and we have to add the component that we want it to turn on. We add that to the bootstrap array. So now that we've done that, it's going to turn on the bar component once it lazy loads the bar module. So over here, we're just going to say, we'll do a button. We'll do a button click again. Click. Load bar. Well, we'll say bar.load is equal to true, and we'll just make this guy b bar because I don't want to go back over to the component. All right, and then in here, sorry, I got to add some text in here. Load bar module, and then we're going to add. Do I have an extra thing there? Okay, hero loader, and we're going to ngIf that. Otherwise, if we don't ngIf the hero loader, as soon as it's put into the DOM, it loads the stuff. So you have to add an ngIf to it, and we'll say when bar.load is equal to true, and then we're going to pass it the module name, which is the same string that we've already used. So we're going to say source app bar.module, bar module, and then when we come back to our app, we've got this new button, and when we click this, you're going to see it's going to load the bar module. Okay, and then the bar module got appended to, and if we look in here, it got put inside. It got put inside it got put right after the hero loader. It got appended to. So anyway, sorry, I got to finish this. If anyone has any questions about advanced lazy loading, I'm going to be here in the office hours in the next hour. Feel free to come ask. I know there's a lot of stuff we just peeled back, and there's a lot of different variations. There's as many variations of lazy loading as there are apps in our community. So if you have any questions or have any needs, feel free to come chat with me before the conference is over. But thank you for your time.